Which player is the key to the Ole Miss running game in 2025?
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Locked On Ole Miss podcast is the most watched Ole Miss podcast, bringing you the latest Rebels coverage every single day. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today, we're talking about how true freshman Shekai Mills-Knight could be the key to reviving the Ole Miss running game to a top-tier SEC level in 2025. We'll tell you how he's going to do it. His size and lateral movement allow the Rebels to keep things simple, while his Navy All-American pedigree give him an edge beyond his years. Mills-Knight brings a physicality that lets the Rebels run the ball even when defenses know that it's coming. And with Ole Miss boasting three backs who complement each other so well, this offense could be scary in 2025. Plus, we talk about Ole Miss baseball being back. Well, sort of. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. And for your second listen, check out Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy for more college football and SEC insights. So let's get started. So Ole Miss famously had trouble running the football in 2024. Other than Henry Parrish Jr., there wasn't really anybody there that could help them out. They were kind of at a loss running the football for whatever reason. Henry Parrish Jr., once he got injured against Arkansas, Ole Miss struggled mightily over the next few games to run the football. Ole Miss ended up with a fifth string wide receiver starting at running back against Florida and Mississippi State. Even with Ulysses Bentley IV on the roster, and whenever he got a large number and a large amount of work against LSU and against Mississippi State, he was able to bust big runs in the run game that was a big key for Ole Miss in those games. But for whatever reason, he did not play. I've heard stories about what happens. I've heard rumors and all that. But the fact of the matter is Ulysses Bentley IV did not play a whole lot. And Micah Davis ended up getting the lion's share carries against Florida in the biggest game in Ole Miss history, which Ole Miss ultimately ended up losing. So how does Ole Miss fix what happened other than personnel, other than the offensive line, all of that stuff? Everybody has their own mindset of what went wrong with the running game in 2024. To me, the running game comes down to personnel at the running back position existing that Lane Kiffin and Kevin Smith feel comfortable with. Period. And I think that Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin feels good about Logan Diggs, Shekai Mills-Knight, and Kewan Lacey, as those being a three-headed monster that could potentially carry the Ole Miss running game in 2025. Shekai Mills-Knight is the interesting one to me. He is a true freshman. He signed in December. He's from the Baylor School in Chattanooga, and he is a Navy All-America player. When you look at his attributes, he's a consensus four-star, a top 150 player, the number one player in Tennessee, and the number 9 running back over the course of the season. And he famously has something to do with the Kylan Deer decommitting, if anybody wants to remember. It might mean nothing. It could be a complete coincidence, but Shekai Mills-Knight of file folder when he was visiting Ole Miss was released, just a picture of it. I think Lane Kiffin took a picture of something going on, and that was on his desk as the top visitor coming in. But whenever you zoomed in on it, thank goodness for high definition cameras, it said number one running back on Ole Miss's board. Said the exact type of thing that a Kylan Deer did not want to hear. And it made me wonder a little bit when I saw that. Was Ole Miss telling the truth about that situation? Or were they doing the car salesman thing that no matter what car you're looking at, it's absolutely perfect for you, according to the car salesman? I think that he actually is and was the number one running back on Ole Miss's board. And that's the reason that a Kylan Deere started getting the wondering eye immediately after that. You have somebody that was listed in the pre-camp season during his senior year at 215 pounds, at 6'1". He's out of Canada. He's a good looking running back. We're going to show his highlights in the next segment. He is somebody that compares favorably to the attributes that Quinshon Judkins had at Ole Miss. When you talk about what made Quinshon Judkins really good, it was his lateral movement. We can all talk about his vision and all of the stuff that he could do pretty well. You don't run for 2,700 yards without being good at your job. It was the off the field stuff that soured that relationship and ended up with a breakup. But on the field, he could do things that other players couldn't do. And his best attribute, and I've talked about this on this show many times, is he could take a solid blow and turn it into a little bit less of a hit. He could turn a little bit less of a hit and turning it into a glancing blow. And he could turn a glancing blow into a missed tackle. That was Quinshon Judkins' superpower. So whenever it was 4th and 1 and you needed 1 yard, he had the ability to get it because of that, to where he was always falling forward. That was his superpower. And if you ask Brian Smith, the Florida football scout, talking about Shekai Mills-Knight, the first thing he does is he has a ton of the same attributes that Quinshon Judkins had. Now, I'm not calling Shekai Mills-Knight and saying he's going to run for 1,500 yards as a true freshman. That was kind of a perfect storm, and in an offense that Ole Miss ran 70% of the time. So means and opportunity and all of that stuff was in the Ole Miss offense in 2022. I do not think that that's going to happen, even though that was the first year with Jackson Dart at Ole Miss and getting him ready. I think that under Austin Simmons, it's going to look a little bit different. And we're going to talk in the next segment about how Ole Miss intends to run the football moving forward and why they had trouble running it in 2024 outside of personnel. We'll talk about all of that, and we'll show some Shekai Mills-Knight highlights as well. But as it sits now, Shekai Mills-Knight playing tailback, I think by the Georgia game of the season, he could be the number one running back on the board. Kewan Lacey could be as well. It's going to be imperative that Logan Diggs takes the bull by the horns in the first part of the season so one of these young guys can take the step that we're hoping that they'll take. Shekai Mills-Knight and Kewan Lacey, just loved by Kevin Smith. And you might say Lane Kiffin as well. It's going to be important that these players take the next step, because Ole Miss, when they're at their best, they're running the ball unexpectedly. They play fearless. In the age of helmet communication, it's gotten a little bit more difficult. Last season, Ole Miss tried to run a 4th and 1 on tempo, which they have done for several years before and had a lot of success on that, but they weren't able to do it in 2024. Why? Why was it a problem in 2024 when it wasn't a problem in 2023? And you're going to have people talk about the offensive line. You're going to have people talk about the running back personnel. You're going to have people talking about all kinds of stuff. But this is the actual reason why Ole Miss struggled to run the football on short yardage in 2024. Remember, Ole Miss returned 4 out of 5 offensive linemen. That was pretty good the year before. Ole Miss had the ability to run the football over the course of their careers. For instance, Ole Miss had a 100-yard rusher against Penn State, and that was the number 1 defense in all of college football. When Ole Miss needed to run the football, they could. Caleb Bourne, Jeremy James, those guys could get it done. For whatever reason, Ole Miss did not utilize them. Okay? Don't know 100% why. It could be a Ulysses Bentley the fourth type situation. I don't know. But that still isn't the reason why Ole Miss struggled running the football in 2024. Helmet communication is the biggest culprit against defenses and Ole Miss not being able to run the football, especially on those tempo-based 4th and 1s. Ole Miss they got next to none as the season went on. And we talked about the Quinshon Judkins' ability to take a solid tackle into a glancing blow, into a missed tackle, all of that. We talked about that already, and that's a major part. And I think that Shekai Mills-Knight is perfect for that. But helmet communication has allowed teams to get the calling quicker of what they're going to do. Defensive teams in the age of tempo offenses have made defensive calls one word, as simple as it can get. And now with helmet communications, it's even faster. So you're dealing with a whole bunch of teams knowing exactly what you're going to do with their cleats in the ground, ready to play the ball. You either have to get creative on the offense, or you have to break a tackle or do something like that, because the defense knows exactly what is coming. Anyway, when we come back, we will let you know why and what Ole Miss is potentially going to do. We're going to look at some Shekai Mills-Knight highlights, and we're going to get ready a little bit later on with Ole Miss having an impressive baseball weekend. So stick around for that. First of all, I do want to tell you this message is brought to you by our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes used to be dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now taxes are as easy as uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. As an expert who is backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy, while they work on your taxes, you do get real-time updates of the progress as well. And you'll get the most money back, guaranteed, all while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is taxes, Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. It's only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only on the iOS mobile app, and see guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantee. So we talked about how Shekai Mills-Knight can make the Ole Miss running game click. He is somebody that I expect by the end of the year to take a major step. And Logan Diggs and Kewan Lacey, they're going to have roles to play as well, because you have a true three-headed monster right now at running back. But I think the guy, much like 2022, that has a chance to break out is Shekai Mills-Knight. Shekai Mills-Knight is a really good player for Ole Miss. He's a really good player right now. Looking at his numbers, consensus top 50 running back, 4-star on all the services, top 100 at Rivals, number one running back in the entire country. It's a situation where, depending on the evaluation, if somebody says he is the number one running back on the board, he is. He is a big physical back that was tasked with being the starting running back in the Navy All-American Bowl. If you understand at all how all-star games work, you understand that pass rush and protecting the passer is the number one concern for coaches going into that game. There's not a whole lot of time to have exotic protections. There's not a whole lot of time to make sure that everything is ready to go, and you have the best athlete that the offensive line has blocked on the other side of the ball, period. The defensive linemen are the best defensive linemen that anybody on that O-line has gone against in their high school career. So you need somebody to take care of pass pro, and pass pro was handled by Shekai Mills-Knight. When he went to the Baylor school in Chattanooga, this Canadian running back transferred to the boarding school at the Baylor school and immediately took over. I think he was a captain for multiple years. He was a big-time player, and it was a situation with the rise of the Baylor school football was the rise of Shekai Mills-Knight. And it's just really interesting to see what's going on, because like I said, it's going to be important for Ole Miss to get Logan Diggs going at the beginning of the season. When Ole Miss opens up against Georgia State, when Ole Miss has Kentucky and Arkansas, you need to be ready to go in those immediate games. You need to be good to go. We can make all the jokes about the kinder, easier spring. We can make all the jokes about the kinder, gentler fall. Ole Miss needs to be ready to go by week 2 this week, as opposed to having 4 weeks of a ramp into the season. It is a different regular season this year than it was in 2024. And it's going to be more challenging, but it's also going to be probably better. Ole Miss has heard everything that's gone on. We talked about why running the ball was a problem. We talked about the personnel that Ole Miss is likely going to have at the running back position. Let's talk about how Ole Miss probably plans to run the football more effectively in 2025. Everybody knows I'm a huge 12 personnel person, period. And with the addition of Caleb Odom and Luke Haas and those guys, Ole Miss brought in 4 tight end bodies over the course of their transfer portal season, or 3 transfer portal bodies or tight end bodies, if you include Caleb Odom, who is a wide receiver, but he's a 230-pound wide receiver, a super athlete, a 5-star. He was a 5-star last year. He was a 4-star this year, but he's still a 5-star. He has all of the athletic ability. He's out of Carrollton, Georgia. He's a good player. But what he gives Ole Miss the ability to do between Luke Haas and Daquan Wright with Caleb Odom potentially is to shift seamlessly from 11 to 12 to even 13 personnel at tempo, to where you don't even have to substitute, where the defense cannot match up to what you're doing. When Ole Miss needs to run the ball, they bring it in tight and run the football. When Ole Miss wants to pass the ball, you have the athletes and mismatches on the outside to throw the football, and that's going to help with somebody like Shekai Mills-Knight at 225 pounds, or Logan Diggs, or Kewan Lacey. It's going to help the running game as a whole, because you can have more creative pass packages and operate at tempo right now, especially with the helmet communication. You can get the play in quicker, and the sideline is putting up the signs and signaling in exactly what needs to happen. This Caleb Odom is going to make the Ole Miss offense potentially very difficult to stop. And when you have a cerebral quarterback like Austin Simmons, listen, Austin Simmons would have graduated from college already if it wasn't from Ole Miss not out offering a class in the fall and him having to take a class in the spring. That is the reason why Austin Simmons is not in graduate school right now. One class that was not offered in the fall, that is only offered in the spring. Austin Simmons is a cerebral quarterback. He is the most Eli-like quarterback that Ole Miss has had since Eli. And because of that, you can do some stuff that you haven't necessarily even thought to do before, just based off of how smart Austin Simmons is. When you have 12 personnel and you're running down the field, or 13 personnel, let's say Caleb Odom and Deshaun Stribling are the outside wide receivers. You have Luke Haas playing a slot receiver, and you have Daquan Wright as the H-back. That is 3 tight ends on the field, all of which match up problems. Caleb Odom playing on the outside, he has the athletic ability to do it. Luke Haas playing in the slot, he can do that as well. And Daquan Wright, we all know about the star turn that he had. Technically, that is 13 personnel. That is Georgia 2022 level stuff with Brock Bowers, okay? And you have matchup problems even within those players, to where linebackers cannot single up and cover that, and they're much too big to be covered by safeties. It's a matchup advantage. Now, you smallest player blocking for Shekai Mills-Knight, who is 225 pounds, is a 210-pound Deshaun Stribling. And mismatches on the outside and blocking, that allows you to run the ball more effectively. But that group of people allows you to be able to go in from 11 personnel or 12 personnel to 13 personnel at tempo without substituting to put the defense in a bad situation. Whenever you walk out there with 13 personnel, the immediate thing that the defense is going to want to do is put their big personnel in the game to handle the run game. You can then spread them out, take advantage of the matchups, and eat them to death throwing the football. It's one of the reasons why I think Caden Lee is going to be a big part of this offense, because of the chemistry with Austin Simmons. But I do think one of the tight ends have to have a chance to have 60 or 70 catches in the course of a season because of these matchups and what they can do. And Caleb Odom is just a matchup nightmare. if Charlie Weiss Jr. and Lane Kiffin, which, it's funny to hear me say this, if they can figure out ways to use him and exploit the matchup ability that he provides, Ole Miss could be very scary offensively. And while defenses are worried about that, they have to worry about on the back of the field, the running back, Shekai Mills-Knight, Logan Diggs, and Kejuan Lacey. That's what's going on with this team. And you can hear from my tone of voice, how excited I am about how Ole Miss is about to lean into 12 personnel. They did a year ago. 12 personnel was a huge part of the Georgia game. 12 personnel is a huge part of this Ole Miss offense moving forward, in my opinion. And Ole Miss with Austin Simmons, I think they have a chance to do some unique things that is going to help this football team out. Listen, Deshaun Stribling, he got assigned number 1. If you look at the practice pictures, that tells you what the staff thinks. And remember, my thing, what the staff thinks of whoever got brought in, look what number they're assigned. If that player has number 86, you probably cannot pay attention to him. If that player has number 1, you need to pay attention to that guy. And Deshaun Stribling might be getting ready to be a dude. Anyway, Ole Miss baseball is back, baby. Well, sort of. They won 2 out of 3 games in Arlington, Texas. They did get run ruled on Saturday, but they run ruled number 15 ranked Clemson on Sunday, and they had some pretty good performances as well. We'll talk about that in just a second. All right, we are back, and Ole Miss went to Arlington, Texas at the Shriners Tournament. They beat Arizona, who was ranked, or at the time was ranked. They have fallen out of the poll because Arizona lost to Ole Miss and Clemson. Ole Miss got run ruled against Texas. I'm not too worried about that game, honestly, because if you look at what happened, Texas scored 7 runs in 1 inning, so it's 1 bad inning of work. Yes, as somebody said on our Discord server, that can do you in, but it's not something to where you throw the baby out of the bathwater over that. I think that was Sam Takoyan pitching in that inning. We'll pay attention to that as it moves forward. But Riley Maddox started off that game pretty well. When you look at Hunter Elliott being the ace of the staff that Ole Miss hasn't really had, honestly, since the national championship run, when they had Hunter Elliott and Dylan DeLucia, Ole Miss is in a really good position to make themselves kind of get right in the 2025 season. Ole Miss absolutely took BP against the Clemson Tigers. That was absolutely fantastic to see. Judd Umark hit a home run that still hasn't landed. I think one of the most overused words in baseball analogies is tank or nuke. You'll see a home run that just barely cleared the fence by 6 inches, and it's like, oh, a nuke. No, he hit a home run. Judd Umark, though, hit a nuke. That thing went 450, 475 feet into the upper deck, went off the bat at 116 miles an hour. It was an absolute moonshot, and that kind of set the tone for how that Sunday was going to go. And now Ole Miss has the ability to kind of win their non-conference games potentially and get right with the bats, because they didn't hit particularly well in the first 2 games. They scored 2 runs in the first game, one of them being a home run and one of them being a sac fly, but it was 2-1 in the final, and they got beat 10-0 in the second game. No runs were scored. So they scored a run a game in the first 2 games, and then they scored 15. And Ole Miss had the freshman Federico, 3 hits on the day. Luke Hill, an absolute baller weekend. That was really cool to see. 2 home runs on Sunday, swinging the bat really well, and the new players coming in. It was interesting to see how they look as well. And Ole Miss, one thing that was interesting to me is Ole Miss, when they're up 0-2 in a count, they're no longer wasting that next pitch. They're throwing a competitive pitch, that next pitch, and making the batter bat defensively. don't give them a free pitch. They're going directly at them. And because of that, Ole Miss, I think, is a little bit more on their toes. That was kind of a momentum killer to me. You get to an 0-2 account and then you throw a ball 2 feet outside. That's just nobody's going to swing at. If anybody does, they're probably going to end up sitting on the bench. But it's a situation to where Ole Miss kind of had everything going. I think they have Eastern Kentucky or something like that this weekend. This will be the first set of games that's on ESPN Plus. I had to catch the game on YouTube streams, honestly, because I wasn't going to pay $30 or whatever the price was for Flow Sports. So it was a lot of box score watching, and when I could catch it on YouTube, somebody on our Discord channel put the link up as it went down. So that was really cool for everybody to have. It's a big game. It was a genuinely big game against Clemson. Ole Miss took 2 out of 3 against ranked personnel, ranked teams in Texas to get ready for the season. I think this baseball team is a little bit better than people have been putting on in the past. We'll see exactly how it goes. But thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your college football and Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On SEC podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in all of college sports. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hotty toddy, everyone. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.